All right, let's talk about problems with verbals. The first type of problem with verbal is the dangling modifier. All right, let's talk about dangling modifiers a bit. Dangling modifiers are a really pernicious problem, and they often lead to unintended humor and embarrassment in a sentence, and you should definitely try to avoid them. They're also very hard to spot. So, for instance, let's take a look at these two sentences. Jim walked down High Street, Eddie George's bar came into view. Those are two short sentences, right? Simple sentences. The writer wants to combine them, so he takes the first sentence and he ings it, right? He makes it into a participial phrase. Walking down High Street, Eddie George's bar came into view. And he thinks, wow, that's great. I made them into one sentence and now everything's fine. But it's not, because walking down High Street, right, a participial phrase, it dangles there. It's going to modify the first noun it hits, and so you have an absurd sentence that literally states that Eddie George's bar was walking down High Street. Take a look, to give you an example, take a look at these two sentences. Growing up in Michigan, my goal was to become a lawyer. Technically, that means that your goal was growing up in Michigan. Goals don't grow, people do. Probably to fix that, you would want to say something like, growing up in Michigan, I always wanted to become a lawyer. Or how about this one? After being detained for 3 hours, the police finally released my client. That's interesting, isn't it? If this is the case, then the police actually detained themselves, because this opening gerund phrase modifies the police, and so what's happened here is that you have an absurd case where the police detained themselves. That's clearly not what's intended, and so what we should probably say is, after being detained for 3 hours, my client was finally released by the police. All right, so let's talk about all the forms of dangling verbals, all the types of danglers, okay? So the first type is the dangling participle. A dangling participle begins with the ing, okay? The ing verb. Driving drunk, the police pursued the man, right? That's a dangler because driving drunk probably doesn't refer to the police. A dangling gerund begins with a preposition, like after, by, in, okay? And then is followed by the ing verb. And it's called a gerund because we know that when you have this word, the ing after a preposition, it becomes the object of a preposition, so it has a noun function. So this is a dangling gerund. After hiking all day, our backpacks were heavy. Even though that seems okay, it's inaccurate because the backpacks obviously weren't hiking all day. A dangling infinitive. Dangling infinitive begins with one of those infinitive verbals with the to. To make a good cake, the flour must be sifted. Obviously, the flour is not making a cake. To fix this, you might want to say, to make a good cake, you should sift the flour. And then a dangling elliptical clause. A dangling elliptical clause. An elliptical clause is a clause where something is left out. The subject and verb has been left out. Okay. While picking his nose, the disgusted teacher ordered the student to stop. This is a bad sentence because it's obviously it's not the teacher who's picking his nose. It's the student. So we might want to fix this by saying something like, while the student was picking his nose, the disgusted teacher ordered him to stop. Okay, we have to put something back in there so that it doesn't dangle anymore. Let's take a look at a couple of them. We've already looked at this one. After being detained for 3 hours, the police finally released my client. We would want to say, after being detained for 3 hours, my client was released by the police. This one, while growing up in Ohio, that's a dangling elliptical clause, right? While growing up in Ohio, my hero was Bozo the Clown. It wasn't your hero who was growing up in Ohio, you were. So we might want to say, while growing up in Ohio, I always wanted to be Bozo the Clown. Or while I was growing up in Ohio, my hero was Bozo the Clown. Before completing the exam, the evaluation form must be filled out. That's a dangling gerund, okay? Notice that the ing follows a preposition. Before completing the exam, the evaluation form must be filled out. The evaluation form can't complete the exam, so we might want to say before completing the exam, you should fill out the evaluation form. Or before you complete the exam, the evaluation form must be filled out. And 4, holding the gun tightly. So if it just begins with ing, it's a dangling participle. Holding the gun tightly, the target came into view and the assassin fired. Well, it's not the target who's holding the gun tightly, it's probably the assassin. So we would want to say something like, holding the gun tightly, the assassin fired as the target came into view. What are some other common problems with verbals? Take a look at this sentence. We found that Bob picking his nose was a distraction during the trial. Notice the verbal right here is picking his nose. It's a gerund, picking his nose. What's wrong? Lack of possessive apostrophe with the gerund. So let's go back, and I'll tell you what should be here. It should be, we found that Bob's apostrophe S picking his nose was a distraction during the trial, because a gerund, a verbal that is a gerund, is a noun. Just as you would say we found that Bob's hat was a distraction during the trial, you would say we found that Bob's picking his nose was a distraction during the trial. The other problem with verbals is that when you do have verbals in a list, they must all be parallel. They must all be the same type of verbal. So, I enjoy running, swimming, and to jog. Uh-oh, you have a gerund, then you have an infinitive, right? That's lack of parallelism. The other lack of parallelism also occurs with correlative conjunctions. Remember our old friends, correlative conjunctions, not only but also, both and, either or, neither nor? Well, most people don't know that when you use, especially in the correlative conjunction, not only but also, what follows the not only must be the same type of word as what follows the but also. So, not only did Bob kill his mother, but also his father was stabbed by him. That's not parallel, because a verb follows the not only here, and a noun follows the but also here. How would he fix that? Bob not only killed his mother, but also stabbed his father. Verb follows the not only, verb follows the but also. Split infinitives. We already know a lot about infinitives. The infinitive form of a verb begins with to, right? To run, to walk, to flee, all right? Technically, you're not supposed to do what is called split an infinitive. That is, never insert an adverb between the to and the verb in an infinitive form. So you would not want to say he wanted to quickly run to the store. You have split the infinitive by inserting quickly. So you would say he wanted to run quickly to the store, okay, instead.